All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. Thanks for joining today for the live stream. And thanks if you're checking this out after the fact. That's cool too. I'm Taylor. I help gardeners explore low-cost regenerative growing techniques without the waste and unsustainability of modern gardening. And today I'm talking about the framework that started it all for me. Started it all specifically in getting into the world of natural farming and making my own gardening inputs. That's right. I'm talking about Jadam organic farming. So if you are just tuning in now, thanks for joining. Go ahead and say hi in the chat and post where you're tuning in from and what your growing setup looks like, what kind of things that you're growing, what scale. Love to hear from you guys each week. This is becoming one of my favorite things that I get to do because during the week, because I get to interact with you guys in real time. It's awesome getting to see you. So first things first, thank you so much to everyone who has been buying the book, A Home Gardener's Guide to Korean Natural Farming by me. Thanks for supporting the work that we do on this channel, getting to share about these incredible techniques, getting them out there into the world, providing context, and empowering growers like yourselves to explore these techniques. A lot of work went into this book. And so if you haven't picked it up yet, you can get it on Amazon in the paperback or get the digital version directly from me. Links are in the description of this video. And or you can go to thegriffinfamilyfarm.com/the-book. And if you have bought the book, if you're one of the people who have been buying it recently, especially over the past week, leave us a review either on Amazon or send it to me directly. We've gotten some very kind reviews so far. I'll read a couple. Ralph Harper, thanks for buying this, dude. He's rated it 5 stars on Amazon. He said, this book is amazing. Goes hand in hand with Taylor's YouTube channel. So much information and made very simple to understand. Great job. Thanks, Ralph. It's super kind of you to say. Teresa M. also gave the book 5 stars. Best Korean natural farming book I have read. She said, excellent book for the beginner looking at Korean natural farming in an easy to read format with great color photos. True. If I do say so myself, that's not a best page. Well, you get it. Great color photos. Or a seasoned natural farmer looking for more information in one place. Lots of content for those using the methods in a home garden. Pairs well with Growing with Griffin's YouTube content. And as a bonus, is a beautiful book to gift or keep on display. Yeah, totally. It's great. Probably a great coffee table book. So again, thank you for the kind words. There's my shameless plug. Okay, I'm done talking about the book because today we're talking about another book. And I almost couldn't find it because we are in the process of moving back to our old house where we're going to be farming this coming season. Can't wait to get started. But this book, I was able to stumble upon, found it. And it's called Jadam Organic Farming, The Way to Ultra Low Cost Agriculture, written by Young-Sung Cho. And who is no less than the son of Han-Kyu Cho, Master Cho, the inventor of Korean natural farming. So this is all interconnected and tied together. So you can of course find this book on Amazon, and I'll put a link to that in the video description here. But actually, I think it might already be there if you go to my Amazon storefront page. Either way, this book has way more reviews on Amazon than mine right now. It's got like over 1,000, most of them 5-star. And this guy, Young-Sung Cho, did some serious work putting this book together. It is a skosh, bit of a rough read at times because, and I don't know exactly, but I wonder if it's more of a word-for-word translation from Korean into English. So it's a little bit tough for me at times to get through, which is why I've read it like 5 times to try and kind of absorb the information. And I seem to stumble upon something new each time. And yeah, and so we're going to get into some of the that kind of actually makes it a worthwhile topic, I think, to cover, because the book is a little bit challenging and it requires you to kind of look into it yourself. I've looked into it a fair amount, and we're going to get into some of the nuances of the approaches. And really, we're just going to get into the basics of Jadam in this video. And maybe we'll go deeper in another one, but that's what we're talking about today. So comment in the chat if which of the Jadam inputs that you've made in the past and which ones you currently use, if any. Would love to hear from you guys about that. If you've made the microbial solution, we share a lot about that one on our channel. If you made the Jadam liquid fertilizer, another one that's huge. If you've made any of the natural pesticide stuff, would love to hear that. And again, if you're just tuning in, would love to for you to share where you're coming from. And Argos Organics, Northern Michigan, thanks for sharing that. Yep, great to have you back. You've got 2,000 square foot gardens. That is a lot of gardening space. But I've recently fenced in 3 acres to start prepping. Awesome. Wow. 80% quack grass. That's a task. Yeah. Okay. Well, maybe you can turn some of that quack grass into Jadam liquid fertilizer, I guess. Yeah, I'll be interested to hear about the plans going forward. So, okay, what is Jadam? Jadam is a Korean, it's sort of I guess an acronym, I think, but it's a Korean phrase that means people who are like nature. I think it's actually multiple words, but it means people who are like nature. And Jadam organic farming, in one sense, is a simplified version of Korean natural farming. KNF uses 9 different core inputs, and it's got 3 ways of kind of creating those inputs. In a sense, they're all, I think, to some degree involve fermentation, kind of, but they use sugar, or traditionally brown sugar, to extract enzymes and microbes and stuff. They've got vinegar extractions that creates a slightly different nutritional profile and microbial makeup. And then it's got an alcohol-based extraction process with Oriental herbal nutrient. But Jadam simplifies things down to, let's just use leaf mold soil to culture the ferments. And those 2 main things, the 2 main ferments, are the Jadam microbial solution and the Jadam liquid fertilizer. And there's also the Jadam natural pesticide suite, which we'll get into, that uses kind of some more chemistry-based creation processes. And so it's a lot of mixing chemicals and kind of getting, like, fine-tuning it to make sure that you get the right amounts, like exact amounts. And Jadam microbial solution and the fertilizer are much more loosey-goosey, but the pesticide solutions, a lot of those are very technical. There's also an additional pesticide that has come out very recently. I think it's like this year that he released the recipe for, Youngsung Cho did, called the Jadam microbial pesticide, JMP. And because I haven't made it yet, haven't gotten to test it myself, you guys will have to just wait till next season to see how it works for me, or if it works, because currently I don't have any pests to worry about. It's winter. I've heard that it is super effective. And so I'll kind of share a little bit about what I do know later on. And then I'll just maybe post this article that you guys can check out. I'll post. Hold, please. I'll just put that in the chat, and then I'll put that in the description later. But there's kind of the article that he released about making the JMP. So before we get into the actual inputs themselves, let's just talk about Jadam a tiny bit. There's a couple of controversial things that are really interesting about the Jadam framework. And when I think back to when I was first reading this, I think I was just barely really getting into gardening. This was like one of my first honestly maybe one of the first gardening books that I ever read, which is kind of a wild entry point because it doesn't read like most gardening books. It's very, I don't even quite know how to describe it. It's like extremely technical and also deeply philosophical, and has a sort of circular approach. Like the techniques are revisited over and over again, it seems like, throughout the book, but then maybe nuanced a little bit differently, and some of the language is unclear. And anyway, it's very much not a it's not in the way that I wrote my book, The Home Gardener's Guide to Korean Natural Farming. That's very much like just systematic, like let's go here and then we'll move on to this input and this is what this does. Jadam, the organic farming, the book, is much more like a gradual kind of turning over of these ideas and sort of coming at them from different angles. So very different. And then woven into that are these controversial talking points that he makes. And so when I was first started with this, but when I first started getting introduced, I didn't realize how controversial a lot of this stuff was because I just didn't know anything about gardening or soil health. And this was probably 5 or 6 years ago now. But one of the main things that he argues strongly about is that there's no such thing as bad soil microbes. And so specifically anaerobic versus aerobic bacteria and fungi and all of that. And that's a pretty tough one for a lot of gardeners to kind of get on board with, from what I can tell. It's pretty, I think I recently touched on this in a video, but typical protocol is like, if it stinks, you got to toss it and start over. But there's a couple of reasons why that might not actually be the case. The main thing that he gets at in this book is that in nature, there's anaerobic conditions all over the place in various areas, and they serve specific functions within nature. And so, different anaerobic microbes are responsible for cycling nitrogen and processing organic matter and decomposing plant debris and kind of balancing out nature. And it's really a bit limited to say we're just only ever going to apply aerobic microbes, especially to the soil. So that's kind of one of the main things that I think is a hang up for people. And then the other thing is that, at least for like organic or sustainable agriculture type folks, this one is confusing. And I honestly am still not even sure quite what I think about it. But Young Cho does not support crop rotation. And his reason for it is somewhat intuitive. I think there's probably pushback here and there that we could get into, but his claim is, nature doesn't rotate crops. It actually just has mastered nutrient cycling, which is the actual problem. And so nutrient cycling, really simply put, is just like, are you putting in the same nutrients at some level as you're taking out when you're growing plants, or or if an animal is feeding on that, and can those nutrients be cycled or processed so that they become available to the next organisms, the continuing biology that lives off the land. And so in Young-Sung Cho's mind, he doesn't really say it this way, but it seems like it's more of an issue of nutrient cycling deficiencies, and nature has that covered. And nature doesn't, carefully rotate crops so that you kind of balance out what plants are drawing what from what areas of the soil. So that makes sense. I think that, maybe where you could push back a little bit would be if animals or birds, come and eat fruit off of a tree and then they fly away and then they are they're pooping those seeds out and replanting them in different places. Maybe that's a natural sort of integrating crops into different areas. But again, I mean, it's hard to know. So that's kind of one of the main things. And then I think that something that I've observed that is really tough for people, at least on the YouTubes and with our interactions with people on this channel is that there's a real hang up with the idea of adding any level of salt to the soil. And I probably answer a couple comments a week on this topic of just like, why are you adding any amount of salt to the soil? Which I get, because salt totally is a way to ruin soil. If you just dump tons of salt on the ground, it will mess things up, and you won't be able to plant there for the foreseeable future. There's probably things you could do about it, but it is dangerous. The only thing is that the amount of salt that we apply and the quality of the salt in Jadam is the quality is high, the amount is very low. And it's simply meant to help culture, specifically the Jadam microbial solution. And then it also feeds soil biology in the actual soil. And anyway, so that's maybe like an additional controversial thing. But let's get kind of, actually, let me just check the chat really quick. If you are just tuning in now, would love to hear where you're growing from and what inputs you've made from the Jadam system. Argos Organics says, I've made JMS, JLF, JWA, and Jadam sulfur. Yeah. So pretty much the suite. And you said Jadam liquid fertilizer is a little stinky. Yep. Korean FPJ and FAA are my preferred fertilizer due to the smell. Yeah, I think I'm kind of on the same page there. I think Jadam liquid fertilizer is such an easy entry point, which is why I keep showcasing it. And then I usually make a batch that's kind of just an ongoing batch that I add to just to have on hand. But I agree. I think that the stinkiness is a little rough for sure. And Turtle Watcher, I made the liquid fertilizer a couple years ago, but it made my partner and neighbors angry. Yeah, probably because of the smell. I now make FPJ instead because it doesn't offend anyone. Fair. Totally fair. Yeah, I think it is something that I've noticed is like you got to be careful where you put your bucket or your rain barrel if you're making it. So, okay. Well, let's hop into, we're just going through the basics. So we're going to go through the Jadam microbial solution, JMS. And this is actually the second input that he talks about making in this book. The first one is natural mineral water, and we'll touch on that toward the end. But the Jadam microbial solution is kind of the main thing. I think that if Young-Sung Cho could distill like all the value in this book, if he had to pick one thing, he probably would say it's the microbial solution, I'm guessing. And he sort of maybe alludes to that in the book. But it's not like it's very simple input to make. There's nothing incredibly fancy happening here, but it's remarkably effective, I think. I think it's just it's probably partly because it's so easy to make. And so the way that you make it, as I've talked about in a lot of videos, is that you are going to collect some what's called leaf mold soil. And ideally, you're collecting this from an undisturbed location in a deciduous forest. Maybe you've got a family or friends who have some forest that's left undisturbed, and you can go scrape away the leaf litter and then dig your hands in underneath that, and there's the soil that has been created. And so in the book, Young-Sung Cho shows that he's actually gone to great lengths of really studying this stuff and seeing how quickly the microorganisms in that soil multiply. So he collects it from the mountains in South Korea and collects it in like many gallons amounts, like 100 gallons a year or something. Of course, he's growing on a farm, but farm scale. But you take that leaf mold soil, and those are your microbes. That's kind of the shortcut version of the indigenous microorganism process from Korean natural farming. He's just saying, let's just jump straight to the source. We're going to take that, and then we'll culture it. And so in case you don't know, culturing is just really a fancy word for fermenting or feeding. You need to feed a microorganism a food source of some kind. to help it multiply and enhance, basically. And so the way that you feed the Jadam, the leaf mold soil microbes, is by feeding it a carbohydrate source. And the typical one is potato. You just cook potato, mash it up. I like to blend mine in a blender because it becomes easier to kind of dissolve into the solution. And the solution is just water with sea salt. Again, just a little bit of sea salt and in the water, and then you put the potato in, then you add your leaf mold soil. And if you're doing this just to use it as like a soil drench where you're not applying it directly to, you're not like spraying it through a backpack sprayer or a pump sprayer, or if you're not watering it in with a watering can, you can just put this stuff straight. You can put the potato and the leaf mold soil just straight into the bucket without straining it through a paint strainer. If you are going to spray it on your plants, then one time or another, whether it's before you start brewing it or after it's finished, you can strain it. But I like to strain mine through a paint strainer. They're super cheap, and then it just becomes this like murky water that then starts to culture. And so the way that you can tell that the culture is alive and active is that there's going to be bubbles forming on the top of the water, and that indicates that the microbes are eating the starches from the potato and then excreting carbon dioxide. And this brew is like a naturally kind of aerated, and probably it's got like lactic acid bacteria cultures, lactobacilli, and then probably a lot of other things that are just in the leaf mold soil. And it's kind of quasi aerated somehow. It kind of naturally aerates. It doesn't need a bubbler to do that. So, and I'm probably not speaking as technically as I could here. Again, in the book, he sort of skirts the issue a little bit. It's a little bit unclear, but this is an incredible substance. And this was the first one that I made when I was first getting into natural gardening. And it's just like when we were trying to expand, when Cassidy and I were trying to expand our garden size, we started with like a 10 by 20 foot little chunk next to our house. And then we quickly started just taking over the whole yard with our garden. And the microbial solution was so helpful in helping us just naturally decompact soil. We did end up tilling once to break up some specific ground that was a bit compact, but then in so many other areas, we could just water in the microbial solution week after week, and our plants did phenomenally well. We never had disease problems. I'm super happy with the JMS. I mean, I still use it to this day, and it's a great thing to have. There's also a lot of other uses for it other than just pouring it on your soil. You can pour it in your chicken bedding, and it'll help keep odors down. You can ferment your chicken feed with it a little. If you just a little bit goes a long way. If you fill up a bucket or something of chicken feed halfway, and then you add equal parts water and then a splash of Jadam microbial solution, it'll naturally it'll help ferment the chicken feed, and you bring out more nutrients from the seeds and whatever you've got in there. So it's a great thing to culture your livestock feed with. And you can water it into your compost pile to add extra microbes to that. I like to add it to my compost pile after it's already cooled down, if I make a hot compost pile. And then something that I only got into probably it must have been last year or a little bit before that, was that the thing with Jadam microbial solution that is a bummer that kind of, in my mind, makes IMO a little bit better is that it's not shelf stable. IMO, once you get it into IMO 2, 3, 4, 5, it's shelf stable. But the microbial solution, you have to use it when it's at peak foam. And if you want to, though, you can just water it into wheat bran substrate. So wheat bran mixed with like wood shavings or dried leaves, and it'll make it's a similar process to indigenous microorganisms stage 3. And so you're basically just mixing up equal parts wheat bran and equal parts carbohydrate, or you could do rice bran or whatever. And then you need a carbon source. So if you're thinking, as far as making a compost pile, you can do your like dried leaves, you could do wood shavings, wood chips, whatever you've got, and you mix that up with your bran material, which is your carbohydrate source. And the microbes in the Jadam microbial solution are going to feed on the carbon and the carbohydrate in the pile. It's going to heat up on its own. I mean, you keep this pile pretty low to the ground because it generates a lot of heat. And you want to keep it in that sub 120 degrees Fahrenheit range, like the 110 to 120 degree range. If you don't have a compost thermometer, you probably don't need to worry about it. But that, once it heats up and then cools down on its own, becomes a shelf-stable form of the microbial solution, which is really nice to have on hand because it's super easy to make. You can make it year-round. And you can't always make IMO. You can make, I guess, if you can't collect IMO year-round necessarily, unless you're doing it indoors, and that's cool too. But my point is, with the Jadam microbial solution, it's so easy to just go collect leaf mold soil, culture it in your bucket, and then water it into your wheat bran and carbon material, and then it becomes a shelf-stable version. You can also, and this is something that I didn't really, for some reason, I didn't pick up on until like my my third or fourth time reading this book I've got here, Jadam Organic Farming, with the cover torn off, is that you can make a customizable version of the Jadam microbial solution. And this is probably another one of the more interesting things that's like very intuitive and is probably not as revolutionary as I tend to think it is. But it's really well articulated in the book, this idea that everything that a plant needs to some degree, it can supply itself with that. So the example that he uses, I'll see if I can actually find the page, but the example that he uses is like a chicken egg. When a chicken, here's the page. Yeah. So like inside of a chicken egg is all of the nutrients that the chick needs to be able to grow, obviously inside of the egg, and then eventually burst out of it. The fruit, or the flesh, and the nutrients that are contained inside of vegetables and fruits actually supply a lot of the initial energy sources and nutrients that seed will need to be able to germinate and then grow. And so, again, perhaps intuitively, that's how we make a lot of the customizable Jadam liquid fertilizers, but you can make customizable Jadam microbial solutions. And I think that this is probably going to be the most useful to people who are growing single crops, is my guess, or if you're growing just a huge amount. I think if you're growing on a home gardening scale, you probably don't need to mess with the customizable Jadam microbial solutions, because I don't know, you want to be able to use that stuff kind of everywhere. It's nice to have an all-purpose version. But if you are, let's say you have a strawberry farm, for instance, you could collect just strawberry crop residue, and then you just add the strawberries, you mash them up, you add them to the Jadam microbial solution ingredients, and then the microbes that culture are going to be the ones that naturally are able to break down and feed on and interact with the strawberries. And so those are the ones that are going to proliferate and expand and whatnot. And then you've got a great microbial solution that's kind of customized to that crop, to the strawberries. And so if you water it in, hypothetically, your strawberry plants will get more of the microorganisms that they need. And you're kind of, you're bringing the leaf mold soil microbes in and you're helping them adapt to strawberry nutrient cycling microbes. And anyway, it's a very interesting process, very interesting theory. And so again, I think that if you're growing a lot of different plants, like me, I'm not growing a single variety, but if you were say you had a lettuce farm, or if you were growing mostly tomatoes, or maybe you're growing on a large scale and you're growing like wheat or something, or even a commodity crop, I think that would be really interesting to experiment messing around with a customizable Jadam microbial solution. And then the last thing that I'll say about the JMS is that you can, I said that the potato is the primary ingredient for the carbohydrate source in the Jadam microbial solution, but you can use other things too. And something that I've experimented with this year is using grains. So I use brown rice. It's cooked, and then some mixed grains. I just take it from my homemade chicken feed. So I've got millet and maybe some wheat berries and maybe some oats in there as well, I think. And if you just cook those and then you blend them up in your blender, you can actually make a sort of pre-made blended thing. You're basically canning them. And again, this sounds like super complicated. I guess I'm going beyond some of the basics, but you can sort of set yourself up in advance so that you can just take a scoop out of the grains, culture it, water it in. It's all made for you. And that worked really well for us this last season. Okay, that is Jadam microbial solution. Maybe we'll return to it if there's any more questions there. Brian Siebert, thanks for checking in, dude. Do you ever check your microbial solutions, amendments, or soil under a microscope? I haven't yet. I need to just buy one. I'm getting greedy, and I'm trying to reach out to companies for a sponsorship and see if they will send me a microscope, because they're a little bit expensive. But I definitely want to check the microbial quality of, for sure, leaf mold soil, the IMO, and my liquid IMO, the Jadam microbial solution, all of that. So that'll probably be this coming season. I'm guessing we'll do some more tests with that. I probably have to bite the bullet and just buy a microscope. And then Brian, you also said, if I can, I will collect leaf mold duff from local undisturbed areas and add it to my leaf mold bin. Nice. Yeah, totally. You can also just add that stuff to your compost pile or your leaf piles as well, and it probably will do great stuff there. One more thing that I should say too on Jadam microbial solution is, if you're brewing it in the winter, you can totally water it in all winter long, probably so long as the soil is somewhat exposed. I don't know. Argos, I know you sent me an email and said that you've got feet of snow. And so I don't know if it really makes sense for you to go wading out in the snow. Probably not. But you can water it in, and the microorganisms, once they get past a certain point in the soil, if it's not like a permafrost environment, they'll do fine. And microbes don't really die when they freeze. They kind of just preserve, and then when they thaw, they just reawaken. Same thing if they get desiccated. A lot of them will do what's called, I think it's sporulate. They'll sporulate. They'll just create spores. And then those spores, when moisture is reintroduced, they waken up and they create, like fungi will wake up from them. Yes, so you can apply JMS all season long. If you're doing it in the winter, you probably want to brew it indoors, because it won't really ferment, in my experience, if temperatures drop below like 45 degrees. Even like 50 is a little iffy. So I just bring it indoors and do it where it's nice and warm, and then I water it out into my garden. Okay, that was a long time spent on Jadam microbial solution. And so I'll just kind of bounce. If you got questions, feel free to ask those in the chat. And if you're just tuning in, please share where you're growing and what experience you have with Jadam. I'd love to hear about, it would be nice to see what of these inputs that you've made before. Or if you haven't made any, then say that. But yeah, appreciate you guys tuning in. The next main Jadam input is the liquid fertilizer, and this is a really popular one because it's so easy to make. It is very hands-off. It's literally just collect crop residue, put it in a bucket, fill it up with water, and add your leaf mold soil, or do that in whatever order you want. and let it sit. You can let it sit for like as little as a week in the hot summer months before it's ready to use. And you can let it ferment for years, is what it says in the book. So I don't know if I've ever had like a more than a 1 or 2 year old, maybe a 2 year old Jadam liquid fertilizer and just kept it. I think I usually use them by that point, whether I put them in my compost pile or use them as a soil drench. But the Jadam liquid fertilizer, you're culturing your leaf mold soil microbes anaerobically, because at a certain point it's going to, all of the aerobic microbes are going to die off because it's just this static fermentation. And so the anaerobes in the brew are going to decompose the plant debris and make bioavailable nutrients. And basically, they're also getting trained themselves to kind of be able to process those nutrients in the plant debris. So again, you can make a customizable version of this by just, if you got a strawberry farm, or if you don't, if you just want to make specific plant fertilizers for different plants that you've got, you can just collect the crop residue from those and add it as your crop, as your substance. So strawberries, just put strawberries and water and leaf mold soil, water to cover it, let it ferment for at least a week, up to years, and then you can use that to water into your strawberry plants. Or if you got tomatoes, you can do that with tomatoes. In the book, Cho says that you can use the diseased crop residue, and the microorganisms will just sort it out eventually, and you kind of just actually eliminate disease. This is I honestly don't know. I mean, he presents a lot of data in this book. So it seems like he really did a ton of work, and he's got all of these things like, USDA organic approved, and he's got, tons of these technical documents for the Jadam liquid fertilizers. He's got nutrient breakdowns of all sorts of these different ones. And anyway, so there's a lot going on. I'm gonna, at a certain level, I gotta trust that he's done the work and that he's getting the results that he's getting, because he's got the farm to show for it. And a lot of Korean farmers have supposedly taken this on as their way of doing agriculture. It is a little bit, there's just still parts that are buried in translation issues. And it's hard to speak with absolute authority, for me at least, that there's no potential problems with the anaerobic microbes doing their thing. I haven't really experienced any issues with them. And my thought there too is that once, for the Jadam liquid fertilizers, as you're culturing them in these buckets or in your rain barrels or wherever you want to, or in jars, once you apply them to the soil, the anaerobes will die off fairly quickly, because they're going to be exposed to oxygen, and anaerobic microbes thrive in the absence of oxygen. And then the facultative anaerobes, which are ones that can they can morph and coexist in oxygen-rich environments and oxygen-lacking environments, those ones will actually emerge in the soil. And so that's where you get your lactic acid bacteria and other great stuff. So yeah, so that's Jadam liquid fertilizers. You apply everything within Jadam diluted except for the JMP, which I haven't personally used yet. But Jadam liquid fertilizer, my basic rule of thumb is if you ferment it a week in the summer, you can start applying it. You strain out the plant debris, and you can apply it diluted 1 to 10 in dechlorinated water. If you let it go for like over a week to a month, you might want to dilute it 1 to 100. And then if it's like past a month or maybe past a year, you definitely want to dilute it just way more. But again, this is just based off of a lot of what he said in the book, is that you want to do tests, don't want to burn your plants with your homemade brews, and just take it easy. So yeah. So that's Jadam liquid fertilizer. It's a very simple recipe, but the Jadam natural pesticide is probably the most it was the most intimidating when I was first getting started. Again, the first read through of this book, I think I just got to the microbial solution and the liquid fertilizer, and I was like, all right, we're going to start there. And then on the second read through, I think I went back and I looked, and I'll show you guys some of the pictures. I mean, if you've made these things, you know. But hold on. He's got these like very, very technical soap making processes laid out. And then he has, later on, he's showing how to make the sulfur. And it's a little like, man, is this worth it? Is what it kind of feels like. There's like he's like very, very specific. I mean, he's a chemist. And so you have to check the temperature and make sure that your sulfur gets up to a high enough, temperature to melt. And he's like, make sure that you're very careful about this. It could burn you, and cause irreparable harm. And okay, so it took me a little while to get into the later stage stuff, but it is interesting. I think that if you are going to be using pesticides on your farm, this is probably a great, like fairly harmless way to do it, because a lot of these just naturally biodegrade. And you're also applying them at pretty low amounts. And so supposedly they don't really harm the bees and the butterflies. Maybe they deter them a little bit, which is kind of a downside. But if you're growing in such a way, if you're growing this for your like livelihood, or like really relying on your crops for a food source, it's probably worth it. And one of the points, maybe this is another controversial point that he makes, is that in the book, Cho says like a lot of people think that pest problems should just go away if you have the right conditions in your soil or in your environment. And he's like, it's just not necessarily realistic for a lot of people growing. Like maybe it will be the case. Maybe the pest issues will resolve themselves. But if you're farming and you're relying on that for an income, you just can't really rely on all of the exact, maximizing the biological processes, the macrobiology that's present, and all the cycles of things that are happening, and keeping checks and balances and whatnot. And so, I kind of agree with that. I can see where he's coming from. I kind of need to probably get a little bit more experience myself. I'm always wanting to go more toward the natural approach, where like we've got an abundance of helpful, beneficial predators that are keeping our pest populations controlled and whatnot. But anyway, sometimes you gotta try this stuff. And again, I think that he has maybe moved on from the natural pesticide suite to just doing Jadam microbial pesticide. But Jadam sulfur takes care of fungal diseases, supposedly, very well. It disrupts the pathogenic microbes' metabolisms, and it keeps beneficial microbes alive. And so we haven't really had much of a use for the Jadam sulfur, and it's a little bit of a scary one to make for me. So I don't know if I'll make more of it anytime soon, because we've got so much. We made like the smallest possible amount. But tell me if anyone's made the Jadam sulfur, if they have used it frequently. Would love to hear your experience, if it's like something that you swear by now, or if it's whatever. But so within the JNP, there's the Jadam wetting agent, which is a surfactant. It's a Castile soap that you make, and it's just very clean, and it's going to help everything spread out on the plant evenly that you spray it to, and then cling to the foliage. Another component is the Jadam herbal solution, and this is like made from ginkgo berries in his book, but he's also got a ton of different plants that are not pleasant for pests to interact with. They have essential oils in them that irritate the skin and deter them. And it's very simple. You basically are just boiling these herbs or these substances and then diluting it a bit and applying it. And so you've also got the, as I already said, the Jadam sulfur solution, which is a mild pest deterrent. And then it also deals with fungal diseases and microbial imbalances and stuff. And then the Jadam microbial solution is another one that is a natural pesticide, according to Young-Sung Cho. And so with these 4 ingredients, the Jadam microbial solution, the Jadam herbal solution, the Jadam sulfur, and the Jadam wetting agent, you kind of can pick and choose and cycle some in and some out based on your needs. So if you've got an infestation of a certain pest, maybe you, I don't know, you go for the sulfur instead of the Jadam microbial solution. Or maybe it's like a little bit unclear, and I've got multiple of these books that actually contradict each other a little bit, it seems like. So that's confusing. In one book, he says you can use the Jadam sulfur and the Jadam microbial solution at the same time. In another book, he says don't do that. So I don't really quite know. I don't know if that's a translation issue, but I think that the Jadam wetting agent is a fun one to make, and it's a natural soap, and so you can use it for a lot of different things, and it's fairly low risk. I'd say like try it out if you want to get into the more chemistry side of things and check that out. The sulfur is probably the last one that I would recommend, just because it's stinky. It smells like rotten eggs, and if you get it wrong and the sulfur doesn't melt, then you have to find something to do to responsibly dispose of the unmelted sulfur. And that's not super pleasant. So, yeah. So that's the Jadam natural pesticide suite. And it's worth checking out, I think, especially if you're growing it with if you're growing in like a high stakes environment, like it's your livelihood, or you really, really, really need your plants to stay alive to supply some of your food, and you're just struggling with pests, it's worth checking out. A couple of other additional recipes that he goes over in this book would be the mineral water. And this is like this as simple as it possibly can get. You're putting leaf mold soil and letting those microbes, you're putting leaf mold soil in water with rocks in it, and you're letting the microbes kind of decompose or digest some of the minerals and make them available in the water for further usage. And so why not? I guess if you've got the rocks and some time and the tanks to extract those things in. We did this a bunch. It's hard to know. We haven't really done tests on this. I don't know if this is like a super effective thing or if it is not, but it's pretty low risk. And then there's, as I said already, there's the Jadam microbial pesticide, which uses something, I think it's called decyl glucoside, and which sounds like a scary chemical, but he assures you in the article that he posted on his website, he assures you that it's harmless to the ecology broadly speaking. And you're basically mixing the Jadam microbial solution with the decyl glucoside, and then you spray that, I believe, undiluted on your plants, and it's apparently really effective. If you want to go to the website, you can check out the video of him torturing some insects with it, and seems like they don't like it. So, okay, I'm gonna check in on the comments. Yeah, guys, thanks for tuning in. Super appreciate you joining. Yes, Jonathan Schultz, what's up, dude? We put 11 collections out in the desert last week. We're going to check them next weekend and see what we got. That's awesome. 11, I'm guessing IMO collections. I am excited to hear back. Send me pictures. Send me pictures of what you get. Send me an email. Would love to hear about that, dude. That's sweet. Christopher Deacon, thank you, Taylor. That was the most informative about JMS. Yep, I'm in London, UK. Yep, bought dried up organic alfalfa, great, which I fermented with brown sugar, not applied yet to colder weather. Nice, yeah, that'll be great for maybe like a fermented plant juice next season. That's awesome. Brian Siebert, what's up again? After about a year or so, the lovely aroma of fermented comfrey does go away. Yes, I have observed that as well with the really aged Jadam liquid fertilizers. The smell greatly reduces. And actually, someone sent a question. I can't quite remember. I can check, but someone had one question that I got was just about this is from Dr. G 1042. How long does the nitrogen stay in Jadam liquid fertilizer? And to my knowledge, I think it probably balances out a bit over time. But I think if you keep your containers sealed up, that nitrogen, first of all, won't gas out your neighbors or yourself, but it also does lock in the nitrogen content a bit. And he says in the book, he says repeatedly, like, keep your containers sealed to avoid evaporation. And I think that's from that nitrogen off gassing. So that might answer that question. And I agree that the smell goes away after a long time. It starts to go down. Yep. Teats Treats, what's up? Thanks for joining. Brian, have the same experience. JLF loses its stink. Brian, you're saying for anyone else who does vermicompost, add shellfish shells, even better, ground up oyster shells to your bins. Yep. Yeah, totally. Worms break down chitin for readily available chitinase. Chitinase for plants. If thou, Taylor, have you ever tried making and using, oh boy, Rhodopseudomonas palustris, purple non-sulfur bacteria? No, I have not. Tell me about it. Maybe someone comment on it. Tell me about it if that's something that I should be checking out. I have not checked it out. Argles, you said sulfur can be good for fruit trees. That's kind of my thought, is that there's a lot of, that's like probably where a lot of fungal and, disease lies, is in the fruit production, the perennials that just year after year suffer from that sort of thing. I would imagine like in viticulture operations, it'd be helpful, because I know wine grapes suffer a lot from disease. My cold compost pile seems to be just a huge worm bin. That seems great. I don't see a downside there. Yeah. Especially, I mean, depends on what you're using it for, I guess. But if you're putting it on your garden, it seems great. Also, the sulfur can be good diluted liquid drench. Oh, interesting. For garlic, for them to get nice and pungent, strong flavor. Wow, interesting tip, Argles. Okay, I will keep that in mind. I'll just say that again. So you're saying the sulfur can be used for a good diluted liquid drench for garlic to get them nice and pungent. That's probably what I'm going to start using my stockpile of Jadam sulfur for. At least I'll try it, because that sounds like it'd be nice to be able to use it when I haven't seemed to be able to need it in the past. Yep. Okay, Rhodopseudomonas palustris is in EM1. Yeah, cool. I haven't tried it out yet, or experimented. So thanks for joining, Brian. See ya. All right. All right. So a couple of other things. Actually, I'm gonna answer a couple of other questions that I got emailed. So let's see. Actually, Argles Organics, thanks for emailing me. This was one, I don't know if I already answered this, but you said you're a big fan of JMS, and that it'll be a game changer for the very sandy sand dune soil that you're growing on. I did seem to miss the window for fall applications. Totally all right. Already have a couple feet of snow, and it looks like sub-zero temps from here on out. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, come April and May, as the snow is melting off, start brewing JMS indoors. And you said your question is in regard to microbial activity in cold frozen soils. From research, do microbes go into a frozen suspended state, or does a good amount die off and then repopulate when the soil warms up? I think that, so typically it seems like, from what I've learned, bacteria are going to be the ones that die off and then repopulate quickly, and then you've got some fungal fungal activity in your Jadam microbial solution that is going to sporulate when it dries out. But then otherwise, like the saprophytic fungi will probably stick around as long as there's some organic matter to feed on in the soil. I think freezing temperatures, I'm just not concerned about. I don't feel like there's like a reset button that gets hit every year when the ground freezes here. Granted, we get down to only like 0 degrees probably at the lowest. So it's not really a permafrost, but yeah, from what I know, microbes stay dormant and stay alive, I guess, like alive or able to repopulate when the soil warms up. So yeah. BF emailed me. I'd like to learn more about optimal storage protocol for completed inputs. Is each one best stored in the fridge or in a cabinet where it could be stored 65 to 85 degrees Fahrenheit? Yeah. I mean, so there's a lot of inputs that you could be referring to, and maybe that's a video in and of itself. I don't just explaining some of that stuff, but for Jadam, the microbial solution, gosh, I guess you could probably pop it in the fridge if you had a big fridge they weren't using to like stifle the microbial development. But I think that it's not really inherently shelf stable. Jadam liquid fertilizer is probably best kept at room temperature if possible, but it's okay if it freezes, just so long as your buckets or your jars don't crack, because then when it thaws, it'll seep out nasty, stinky sludge water. And then Jadam sulfur and the wetting agent you want to keep indoors at like cool temperatures, ambient, probably like, in that 65 to 85 degree range. For the KNF inputs, those are probably a little bit different, but for the most part, if you've got them saturated with brown sugar, then you can keep them at room temperature. If you don't have them, like if your LAB is just, there's no sugar added, then you want to pop that in the fridge so it doesn't over ferment and waste the bacterial cultures. And for your vinegar, it can be kept at room temperature. Oriental herbal nutrient is room temperature. IMO 3 and 4 and 2 room temperature. So yeah. So guys, I think we're going to start wrapping it up there. And if you, I guess to conclude, feel free to email me further questions if you want those answered in another episode or another live stream. That's what this is. And I actually would be interested in kind of diving into some of the more interesting nuances and maybe discussing that. So if anyone, the nuances within Jadam organic farming specifically, guys, I'm tired. I've been moving, and so my brain is a little frizzle frazzled, and haven't gotten a ton of sleep lately. Also with the kids, that's a wild ride. So so thanks for bearing with me, and yeah, thanks for tuning in. And as always, don't forget to check out my book, A Home Gardener's Guide to Korean Natural Farming. Supports the channel, gives you an all-in-one place to look at and learn the techniques from Korean natural farming. Check out the Jadam book. I mean, I think that I want to say that it's worth buying. I kind of go back and forth on it because some of it is challenging to wade through. You can also check out the website and just get introduced that way. But if you have any questions, email them to me at taylor@thegriffinfamilyfarm.com. And I would love to get those answered in a future live stream, and look forward to hanging out with you guys in the future. Thank you.